Fair enough. Just like forget about it entirely. All right, that's cool. Hey, really quick before I dive into this last session with you, I would like to take a photo, and I would like you to be in it. Here we go. Ready? Get ready. Here we go. Ready? All right, we'll see if that turned out. I used my profile, so trying to see who I missed. Oh, yeah, I'm a little far out. Let me get more in the center here. Try it again. Okay, here we go. That was good. That was good. That was a good first try. Okay, ready? Here we go again. Let's see what we got now. Oh, yeah, that's the jam. That's the magic right there. All right. Airdrop it. All right, let me see which one's best. Just airdrop the whole thing, huh? All right, let's see here. Airdrop. Oh, and then it's just like, there's 100 of you. Okay.
Click all of them.
Just individually.
Someone will eventually get it, and then someone did. I love those.
All right, are people getting it? Hold on, there's a couple that still don't have it.
It's very blurry.
I know, it is a little blurry, but it's okay. It's more about the vibe. We're aiming at vibe there.
And it's the first
Yeah, you guys, everybody get it that wanted it?
Yeah.
I'm not in it, so I don't want it.
You're not? Oh, all right.
Take another one. You gotta redo it.
Danica declined it.
Danica.
It's fine, I can.
What?
You declined it.
What?
You declined it.
No, it didn't show up on my phone.
It's fine. You guys can pass it around. But that's all I needed. I just needed a little memento. I don't know.
Listen, I'm just gonna make it easier for us.
How so? What are you going to do with it?
Yeah. Give me the phone, please.
Good grief. All right, I'm trusting you. All right. While he's ambushing my phone and taking all my personal data, let me say this.
Your identity.
Yeah, which is fine because it's not worth that much anyway. Yeah. Okay, couple of things as we begin. First one is this. Let me express my gratitude for your attention and for your questions and for the friendship, the dialogue, the interaction. It's really fun. It's fun to be back here. Fun to be in this space, which feels a little bit like home to me and certainly feels like home to you. So thanks for inviting me into your home and allowing me to be a part over the last couple of days. And thanks for being gracious to my friends as well. It was nice to have them here, and we got some good stuff done, in our little meetings during the day yesterday, which was nice. And then they, like cowards, they left before the snow came. So lame. But anyway, thanks for letting me be here. If at any point now or forever, right, you need anything and I can help you, it's as easy as just shoot me an email or call or whatever. Dallas knows how to get a hold of me. It's not that hard, but if I can ever be of any help, or if you find yourself living in Southern California, if you're near Orange County or LA, if you find yourself going to Biola, that's literally like a 10-minute drive from where I serve at Fullerton Free Church, whatever. But if I can ever be of assistance to you, even in the process of whatever, if there's ever stuff that I can help with, I want you to feel a sense of my availability. I'll find it later, whatever you did to my phone. I'll figure it out. Okay, so I'm just kidding. But no, so I want you to just feel a sense of like, I'm saying you are welcome to reach out to me if I can ever be of any kind of service, okay? So that's just, to me, that's kind of what the kingdom of God is about. And we're supposed to be in it together, and even though we've only just had a week together, there may be times down the road where you're looking for an objective, extra opinion on something, and if I can help, you always just have to reach out to me. It's as easy as that. Last thing is, before we dive into the stuff for today, do you have any questions about the stuff we've already covered? So just to refresh and go over, we're talking about sort of foundations, discipleship foundations, like core philosophies that drive the way, not only the way we serve, but the way we live, the way we put Jesus on display. So we talked on the first night about the sort of core fundamental philosophy of life, which says Nobody receives anything except that which they receive from heaven. I'm dependent upon God. I'm going to point away from myself. I'm not the Christ. I'm just the one who comes before him. I'm not the bridegroom. I'm the one who stands next to the bridegroom and rejoices. So I'm dedicated to the joy of someone else, right? And then lastly, the idea of just recognizing I'm decreasing and being good with that. Like not trying to fight it and not letting it stress me out that like my significance isn't really the thing that is the biggest issue over time, right? So we talked about the philosophy of John the Baptist on the first night. We went on to talk about the revelation of Christ because John the Baptist has the ability to point across the river at literal Jesus standing there. We don't have the ability to do that in the same way. The way in which we point to Jesus is by revealing him in our life, by putting on Christ. The New Testament authors talk about that a lot. We talked about the fact that it is only possible for Christ to be revealed by us if first Christ has been revealed to us, and then Christ revealed in us, both individually as we're conformed to the image of Christ as individuals, but corporately as Jesus is revealed in the body, right? So that's where that diversity, and we'll come back to some of that this morning too. That diversity is so vital. And then last night we took sort of the next step that says when we're revealing Christ, there is an aspect of who Christ is that's difficult for us to replicate if we don't understand it. We don't need to die for the sins of our neighbors. We also don't necessarily have to give up our literal lives for our faith, although some may do that, and certainly some around the world will do so today. Last night we said if we want to put the sacrificial love on display, the way we do that is by laying down our lives and our preferences. We talked about what it looks like to be sacrificial people, to die to ourselves. This morning, then, I kind of want to do something that's a little more intensely practical and just talk with you a little bit about how that actually works in our day-to-day lives. And I really want to speak specifically this morning to your individuality and the value of that, of leaning into who God made you to be. But before I do any of that, any questions about any of the stuff we've already covered, or stuff that came to you later, things that you thought like, oh gosh, I wish I'd have said this or that? No? I did have two folks ask me questions last night, and it was almost the same question. So let me just hit this really fast because it may resonate with some of the rest of you too. The question that came up was a question of like, if I'm just laying down my life and laying down my life and giving up my preferences and sacrificing myself constantly, how does that fit with what we talked about in the grill with regard to like creating margin in your life and not needing to say yes to everything and going and going and going? And the answer to that, there's a couple of different things, but the answer is we want to live our lives sacrificially, but we also want to be living our lives in such a way that we'll be able to live sacrificial lives in longevity. Does that make sense? So if you give and give and give and give for like an hour or a week and you empty your bank account and you run yourself into the ground and you drop dead from exhaustion because you've been such an incredible servant for 1 week, there is less glory for God in that than there is if you pace yourself and you create some margin, if you manage your money well, if you think well about what you're doing and how you're doing it, so that you can be a servant, not just this week, really awesome, but you can be a servant next week, and you can be a servant in your 30s and in your 40s and in your 50s. And the only way to have longevity in sacrifice, to have that glory for God in longevity, is to be a good manager of your life, a good steward of your life today, which means that sometimes you will have to say no to things. And part of what I said to the folks that asked me last night is when it comes to saying no to things, I try not to do that singularly. So what I mean by that is when I'm saying no to things, I try to do that in a sort of a corporate setting, right? So I've got my wife, obviously, is the best gauge of what I should say yes to and what I should say no to. And because she's outside of me, she has a more objective opinion of when I'm just being lazy or when I'm being selfish or when I'm saying no because I just would rather play video games. So she will help me be a guide on that. The elders in my church are also a good objective guide for what I should say no to and what I should say yes to. I also have a circle of peers and mentors, friends in my life who will speak into my life. And in those moments where I'm like, should I take this opportunity? Should I go here? Should I do that? Should I donate this amount of money? Should I do this other thing, right? When I'm trying to gauge what level of sacrifice is appropriate at any given time, and sometimes I don't trust my own self because I'm sinful and selfish and prideful, and we all have like that wrestling with the flesh. It's helpful to have objective voices outside of yourself that can say, you're not being selfish, you're being wise. Or they can say, oh gosh, you just don't want to do that thing because you hate washing dishes for people, and that's not a good reason to say no, you should go wash those dishes. And then listen to those voices. Does that make sense? But that then gives us the ability to be sacrificial for the rest of our lives instead of like super sacrificial for a couple of days and then burned out and hating Jesus and everybody else. Does that make sense? Okay. So with that said, I kind of want to go back over a couple of things, and I want to specifically start by saying I think most of the time when it comes to our life of revealing Christ being diminished or minimized, that mostly and typically does not happen because of external voices or lack of opportunity. It happens because of an internal voice that says, you're not good enough, or you're not as good as the people around you, or you don't know enough, or you've made too many mistakes, or whatever. There's this like internal dialogue that is fed by external voices, but resonates internally, that sometimes leads you to believe like, you know what? I don't have the gift of evangelism. I don't have the gift of teaching. I'm not good at memorizing Philippians, blah, blah, blah. I don't have all the right cards in my deck, so I'm just always going to be kind of a ho-hum follower of Jesus, right? I can't really reveal Christ with excellence because I'm just an average person, or maybe I'm below average person. And because of the things we've experienced and because of voices, sometimes we diminish our own value. And that's what I want to speak against this morning as we finish our time philosophically, because it's vital that you understand that God not only made you exactly the way you are, but he also brought you into circumstances exactly the way they have occurred, or in some cases allowed those circumstances to occur, to shape you into exactly who you are today. And when you're 30, and when you're 40, and when you're 50, that shaping continues so that God, in every stage of your life, has you fit to be exactly who he wants you to be in that particular season. So I want to kind of make a case for that as we go this morning, but I'll start with my most embarrassing moment. How about that? Just to kind of give us a baseline. I know, this is a bond right here. I'll share it. So I think I told some of you maybe that I was in the marching band. Some of us talked about it. And when I was in high school, freshman year in high school, I signed up for band because I don't want to do PE because I got asthma and because I'm chubby and whatever. So it doesn't matter. But I signed up for marching band. I play the piano, by the way, and it turns out you can't play the piano in a marching band, right? Because it's very difficult to carry that onto the football field. And so the band instructor is like, well, why don't you be on the percussion team? You be one of our drummers. And so I joined the drum line freshman year at the school I went to in Arizona. The way the drum line worked was that freshmen played cymbals, crash cymbals, and then sophomores played the bass drum, big bass drums, right? And then juniors played snare, and then seniors could play the quads or the tritoms, whatever. So my freshman year, I got cymbals, and I don't know how much you know about crash cymbals, but basically you got a big piece of metal with a hole in the center, and then there's a leather strap that goes through that hole, and you tie it in a double knot, like it's a special knot on the inside. Then you hold the leather strap, and you can play a crash cymbal two different ways in a marching band. This will set up the story, but the most traditional way to play a crash cymbal is to bang them together, right? So when you hear the national anthem or whatever, you probably heard that before. That's the typical way you do it. The other way you can play a crash cymbal in a marching band is to use the crash cymbals as a hi-hat cymbal, which what that means is you've got to have one on the bottom and one on the top, and then the snare drummers will play the snare and the cymbals like a hi-hat. Now, we don't have a drum kit here, but if you looked at a drum kit, you'd be able to see it. A normal drum kit has a hi-hat that's played with a pedal, and the cymbals kind of go or right? In order to use your cymbals as a hi-hat cymbal in a marching band, it requires the cymbal players to learn the field routine entirely in reverse and to march it backwards. Does that make sense? Because I have to be facing the snare drummers the whole time so they have access to my cymbals. That's just a setup for the story. Freshman year, we marched in all the football games. We went to several local competitions, but the big marching band competition in Phoenix is the one that happens at Arizona State University at the end of the year. All the marching bands go, and then there are international judges that come. There's like 20,000 people in the stands at the football stadium at ASU watching these marching bands put on their performances. You train all year for this, and there's a rating scale that goes 3, which is the lowest, 2, which is okay, 1, which is good, or then they'll give you an A, which is like the best score you can get, right? You get an A, that's above a 1. And my marching band at my high school had only ever gotten A's. Like we were one of the best bands in the state. So we've been training, we've been practicing, we're very disciplined. We go to ASU Band Day, and I remember like it's yesterday, we're standing on the sidelines, waiting to take the field. We're going to play 3 songs. We're standing at parade rest. And while we're standing at parade rest, we get the 2-minute warning that we're going to take the field. And then the unthinkable happens. My right-hand cymbal, the knot, comes untied, right? So the knot comes untied, and when that happens, the cymbal is so heavy, you're holding onto the strap, but there's nothing to hold the cymbal to the strap anymore. So the cymbal basically slides off the strap and falls to the ground, and it makes this awful noise, you can imagine, right? So I'm standing there, knot comes untied, cymbal falls, crashes. We're waiting, like in front of 20,000 people, and now I got the upperclassmen behind me who are like, you idiot, bleeping, stupid, dumb freshman, you're gonna ruin this. We're not gonna get a good score. You better fix that cymbal. These guys are ticked, and they're not necessarily nice guys, right? So I'm kind of panicked. So really quick, I lean down to pick up my cymbal, and when I do, I hear a noise that's worse than the cymbal crash. When I lean down to pick up the cymbal, I hear the sound of my pants ripping. And I'm wearing these like a little too tight black polyester band pants. And when I tell you that they rip, I don't just mean I got a little tear in my pants. They literally rip from the bottom of my zipper to the back of my belt loop, right? So what I've essentially got are two separate legs attached by a zipper. That's what I got, right? I'm wearing like Hanes whitey-tighty underpants underneath these black tight polyester pants. And so I hear this rip, and then the guys behind me are like, bro, we can see your drawers, you know? And I'm like, what? And I literally can feel wind coming in my pants, you know? So now I'm tying the strap on my cymbal, and I'm also thinking like, what do I do? Like my pants are torn, like what am I gonna do? And then the drum major blows the whistle for us to take the field. So I'm like, hey, you know, they tell you like the show must go on. If you miss a step or you trip or you miss a note, you just keep going. So I'm like, okay, I just take the field. So we march out into our opening positions for the first formation for the first of 3 songs. And then it occurs to me that all 3 of the songs we're doing for the judges on that particular day are songs that do not require a crash cymbal, but require a hi-hat cymbal, which means my first 4 counts are 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I have to march the whole thing with my butt facing the stands for 20,000 people. It was the worst day, right? The worst day. And you can imagine, like the rest of the time I'm in high school, I never lived that down. Like they taunted me about that forever. Even on the next Monday, we show back up to school and they play a VHS cassette. You guys don't know what that is, but back in the old days, VHS cassette. They play a cassette and the judges record their comments, right? So I show up for band on Monday and they put it up on the big screen and we're sitting there and I'm like, you know, and this is what it sounds like. The judge goes, flute players, I love your pitch. Wow, it's really crystal clear. Trumpets, I'm impressed by those high knees. Way to keep those knees up, trumpets. Good job. Cymbal player, nice underpants. And I'm like, no, right? It's like the worst, right? And it's funny now, but as a freshman, you can imagine, not funny, like the kind of thing you just want to die. You just want to disappear, right? You just want to die. All of us have these things in our lives. We could go around. We don't have time this morning, but all of us have these moments, and sometimes they're comical. Sometimes they become comical like 20 years later. But all of us have these things in our lives that have the potential to threaten the way we perceive ourselves, and to threaten the way we perceive the other people perceive us, right? That those can be defining moments that can almost be debilitating. I'm going to go back over a couple of passages we've read just to set up the main text I want to look at this morning. But come with me again, if you will, to 1 Corinthians chapter 12. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, because I want you to think afresh about the body of Christ and the beauty of it, right? 1 Corinthians chapter 12, starting in verse 12, says this. For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. Think again with me about the idea of Christ revealed in us, right? In us communally. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free, and all were made to drink of one Spirit. So those old divisions, all of those cultural divisions that the rest of the world says need to divide us, in the Spirit of Christ have been eradicated. We become one organism, right? It says in 14, for the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smell? But as it is, God arranged, if you're taking notes and you have a paper Bible that you can take notes in, or an iPad or whatever, underline God arranged. As it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as He chose. You can underline that as well. God arranged as He chose, right? As it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as He chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. As we begin, yes? Good. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 12 through 20. And the place that I would encourage you to underline, should you want to, is in verse 18. Because it talks about God's intention, right? It talks about God's purpose. There are times in our lives where we're tempted to look at ourselves and be judgy of ourselves because we're not like the person sitting next to us. Or a guy or a girl can come and they can lead a class, or they can teach, or they can speak in Ponderosa camp or whatever, you can see these people and you go, man, that's an important part of the kingdom of God, right? There's a person, that's a hero, that's a giant. The authors that you read or whatever else. You can shift in your mindset to diminish your own importance or your own value and place value on things, but all are part of the body. And the body has been arranged the way God chose, right? He chose it and arranged it, and he doesn't want everybody to be the same thing. He doesn't want us all to look at the world the same way. He doesn't want us all to have the same gifts. He doesn't want us all to move and have our being in the same way, right? God has created us intentionally with diversity for the beauty of the revelation of Christ. So that's the first little reminder, right? Another passage we've already looked at in 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 9, right? Says, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, right? And it's easy for us to be like, yeah, holy race, we're like a chosen people, we're a priesthood, good for us. But we are all those things for a reason. If you're taking notes in 1 Peter 2, I would say underline the that after the comma of the word possession if you're reading ESV. You're a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, but you aren't just those things. You are those things for a reason. God has chosen you, and he's appointed you, and he's anointed you, and he's called you his sons and daughters. He's equipped you so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness and into his marvelous light. I think there is a tendency for us as Christians to lean a little more heavily into the proclamation of his marvelous light than to talk about the fact that we were once in darkness. Does that make sense? We love to talk about his marvelous light. We love to talk about his glory. We like to talk about his amazing grace. But we tend to sort of shy away from talking about where we've come from. We'd rather just sort of live our lives as if we were always aware of this light. But God chose us, and we are holy and royal and appointed and anointed for the sake of declaring the whole story, which includes our brokenness and yet our usability. Does that make sense? That's all part of what God chose to do in and through us. He says in verse 10, once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God. What are we talking about there? We're talking about the revelation of Christ. They'll see our lives, even when they're tempted to accuse us or tempted to dismiss us or tempted to hate us, they'll see our lives of sacrificial love, us mowing the grass, us washing the dishes, us doing all of that stuff. They'll see us and not glorify us, but glorify the God to whom we're pointing away in the spirit of John the Baptist. Does that make sense? You are all these things for a purpose. God appointed you these things for a reason. We believe, and 1 Peter chapter 2 affirms it, we believe in what's called the priesthood of the believer, right? What that means is that you don't have to go through a priest. There is no other intermediary through which you have to find absolution for your sins. You don't have to confess. I mean, we do confess them to one another for the sense of community, but there's not a priest you need to go to. In Christ, we all have access to God, right? So we believe in what's called the priesthood of the believer, but what's more, like almost everybody affirms the idea of the priesthood of the believer, right? There's very few who would argue with that. What we miss sometimes is the ministry of every believer, right? The ministry of every believer. We sometimes reduce ministry or the life of ministry to the vocational leaders who've gone to Bible college or been through seminary or work in churches or whatever. But another refresher for you here in Ephesians chapter 4, we already read this verse, but Ephesians 4:11, he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints, and that's all of us, to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. If you have a Bible where you can take notes, I would say, again, in 16, you might underline that, when each part is working properly. So what that means is that the body grows, the revelation of Christ is improved when each one of the individual parts is functioning in health and wholeness. So the diversity that's represented both in this group, but the diversity that's represented in your local churches, the diversity that's represented in the kingdom of God, it's not like a throwaway. It's not like a side effect. It's central to the way the body grows. When we embrace the fact that none of us are the same, that we see things different, that we approach things different, the body gets healthier, and the picture of Christ gets bigger and better. Does that make sense? So what I'm trying to enforce and what I've been trying to sort of point you towards all week is the fact that God has appointed you and chosen you, that He's made you uniquely to be exactly who you are at every given point in time. You're going to grow. You're not going to be the same person in 10 years that you are today. If you are, there's a problem, right? You're not going to be the same person in 3 months that you are today. If you are, there's a problem. I'm not the same guy I was yesterday, right? God is refining us and He's transforming us. But at every given point in time, I have a place in the body, and my place is important. It's not more important than yours. It's not better than yours. It's not more beautiful than yours. It's not more essential than yours. But my place is important. And it's only when I recognize that God made me, and that I'm meant to connect with you, that the body grows and the revelation of Christ becomes something actually beautiful. If it's all ears, it's gross. And if it's all noses, it's gross. And if it's all elbows, right, that's the body imagery again. If it's all one thing, or if the body has started to say, well, yeah, we're all here, but it's really the elbow that matters most of all, that doesn't make sense, right? The elbow can't function without the muscles and without the skeleton. And, there's all these, it's only in the working together. We talked early in the week about Paul in 1 Corinthians when he's defending the idea that people shouldn't be aligned with Paul or Apollos or Cephas. He does so by saying, look, Paul and Apollos, we're just one plants and one waters, but God gives the growth. These two are nothing without God who does that work, right? But that doesn't mean that planters and waterers aren't important and aren't valuable in the field, right? We all bring something to bear. I love in Acts chapter 2, where it's talking about the early church, and I pointed at this, but we didn't read it. Listen to the way it describes this early church in Acts 2, verse 42. It says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to their number day by day those who were being saved. I want you to see the beauty of that community, right? I want you to see how much it talks about togetherness and unity. Not only are they together in their corporate worship, not only are they together at the Lord's table, but they're also together in the sharing of a sandwich and a bowl of soup, right? They're together in these things, and in so doing, they're growing in favor both with God, and don't miss it in Acts 2, they grow in favor with God, and they also grow in favor with man. I think sometimes we have this sort of false impression that if we're revealing Christ accurately, the whole world is going to hate us. And that isn't true either. There will be some in the world that hate us. But the reality is the early church was growing not only in favor with God, they were growing in favor with man. And you want to know why? Because there was beauty in this community. There was beauty in their togetherness. There was beauty in their equitability, right? The fact that they saw each other as peers, even though they came from different walks of life. That was magnetic, right? There was this magnetic quality to this early community. And I would say sometimes the church today has become less magnetic because we've kind of taken on this mindset occasionally that says, you know what, the world's going to hate us anyway, and who cares, right? We got our own little thing going on. Well, that's not who we've been called to be. We've been called to be ambassadors. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 says God has appointed us to carry the message of reconciliation, right? So, I'm talking about your individual value. I'm talking about your individual experience. I'm talking about where you come from and who God made you, and the fact that it's also His responsibility to put you in the right place at the right time to have the impact He created you for. So to illustrate that, here's the last thing I want to look at this morning, and here's where we'll spend the bulk of our time. Mark chapter 5. If you have a Bible, turn to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5 is one of my favorite stories, and when you have the opportunity to go to Israel, you'll have an opportunity to stand in the place where this story takes place, or some close approximation to that. Hello, Evan, my good friend. Nice to see you. You guys know Evan, yeah?
He's our teacher.
Oh, good. And you love him?
Yes.
Okay, good. Right, good, because if you didn't, we'd fight. Mark chapter 5. Okay, so Jesus is in a boat and he comes across to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, to to essentially the Gentile side of the Sea of Galilee. And here's what happens when he gets there. It says, they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes, and when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones, right? So Jesus gets out of the boat, and the way this story is told is literally as he gets out of the boat, he's immediately confronted with a crazy person, right? A demon-possessed man, and the people of that area, his neighbors, had done everything they can to try and manage him, right? That's not the point of my message this morning, but it is worth noting that apart from the power of God, all we ever do is manage the brokenness of human beings. They tried to chain him up. They tried to relegate him to the outside of town. They tried to tie him up with ropes and chains and whatever, and he broke the ropes and he broke the chains. So finally they're just like, let's have this guy live out of town in the tombs where we don't have to deal with him all the time. But he's cutting himself and he's crying and whatever. Why? Because the townspeople don't have the ability to do anything to the real cause of his brokenness. They can only manage brokenness. The world, apart from the power of God, will only ever be capable of managing brokenness to their best ability, and that ain't that great. Jesus comes upon this man. Watch this. It says, verse 5, night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. Crying out with a loud voice, he said, what have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me, right? The people of this town aren't really going to understand who Jesus is, but the demons certainly know who Jesus is, right? Don't torment me, he says. I adjure you by God, do not torment me. Verse 8. For he was saying to him, Jesus was saying, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. Jesus asked him, what is your name? And he replied, my name is Legion, for we are many, right? I think one of the heartbreaking things about this story is that this guy is so far gone that he's lost his very sense of self. He's lost his very identity. He doesn't even know his name. This guy was born, right? He has a mommy somewhere. He doesn't know his name anymore. He's lost his identity. He's lost his very sense of who he is. And in the face of that, Jesus can't let it stand. Why? Because Jesus created this guy. Jesus loves this guy. He's not going to leave this guy in a condition where not only has he lost his dignity, but he's lost his very sense of who he is, created in the image of God. Jesus says, who are you? And he says, my name is Legion, which means we are many. And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, send us to the pigs, let us enter them. So he gave them permission. The unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. Right? Now you'd think at this moment, this man has just been freed, right? The chains have been broken. This guy's been freed from having a legion of demons within him. You would think the townspeople would be like having a party, right? This is like a day of celebration because they had done everything they could to try and minimize this guy's brokenness. They could not do anything but manage it and barely manage it at that. You would think that at the result, this guy now has been healed. You'd think they'd be like, yeah, we got, Roger back or whatever the guy's name was, right? Here he is. It's nice to have him back. That is not the response of the townspeople. Look at what the townspeople do. It says in verse 14, the herdsmen, those are the herdsmen that were looking after the pigs, which, by the way, represent a gigantic financial investment, right? So when you think about these pigs being indwelt by evil spirits and then running into the sea and dying, you think like, oh, sad little piggies. But like for the people that own the pigs, they think, that's an investment. Those are dollars. Because not only can those pigs be sold, but those pigs can make more pigs, which can be sold. That's not just like a one-time loss. That's like a loss in perpetuity, right? The herdsmen who were watching the pigs fled and told it in the city and in the country. And the people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had had the legion, sitting there, clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. This is weird, right? It should be weird. What are they afraid of? The guy was cutting himself and screaming. He was naked. He was ranting. He's living in the tombs. He's like a wild beast filled with a legion of demons. Now they come to see what's happened to their pigs, and they get to the foot of Jesus, and they see the guy who was formerly a madman sitting at his feet, clothed and in his right mind, and it says the townspeople are scared. They're not scared of the guy. They're scared of Jesus. They're scared of Jesus because Jesus represents a financial loss for them. And And when we talked yesterday about living a life of sacrifice, when we talked yesterday about living a life of service, when we talked yesterday about dying to yourself and laying down your preferences for the good of other people, I just want to acknowledge that there are some of you who, in the course of your life, will throw that principle out wholesale because you're scared of the financial cost of Jesus, right? You're frightened by Jesus. They see this man dressed in his right mind, sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to him teach, and they were afraid. Those, verse 16, those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs, and they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. Check this out, right? Jesus has come to town and done what none of them can do, right? He's healed this man that all they could ever do was manage. And they are so scared about losing more money. Like if Jesus stays around here, who knows what he's going to do next? He doesn't care about our investments. He doesn't care about our personal property. He doesn't care about our livestock. He doesn't care about of any of those things. He's just trying to help people. Forget that, right? Why? Because they've placed their own property and their own financial gain over the health of one of their members, right? One of the people in their city. Well, that happens all the time today. That happens all the time today, and not just among pagans, right? I'm not just talking about a thing that happens among the worldly. In Christendom, there are all kinds of people in churches today who care more about their property, or they care more about their brand, or they care more about selling their books than they do about the lives of people who are lost and broken. Jesus doesn't care about your financial gain or mine. He doesn't care about your reputation. He doesn't care about your property. He doesn't care about any of those things. You know what Jesus cares about? You. And the person sitting next to you, and their cousins, and their aunts and uncles, and their neighbors, and the people they worked with back at Pizza Hut in the day. Like, Jesus cares about people who are created in the image of God. And sometimes in his passion and concern, in his healing power brought to bear in the lives of broken people, there are financial costs. And for some people, they would rather deal with demons than deal with Jesus. Does that make sense? They're more scared of Jesus than they are of the demons. The demons they could manage, and it didn't cost them anything. Jesus cost them something, and so they ask him to leave. They actually beg Jesus to leave. They're like, hey, thanks so much for coming. Your boat is right here. Go ahead and get right back in that boat and head on out. Interestingly, Jesus doesn't argue with them, right? So it's also worth noting that in the times and places where we invite Jesus to leave us alone, he does. Right? You get to the place where you go, I don't care about discipleship. I don't care about the lost. I don't care about glorifying God. I don't care about being a servant or sacrificing, pointing away from myself. Jesus isn't going to force himself upon you. There is a day coming, according to Philippians 2, which you will memorize shortly. There is a day coming when every knee will bow and every tongue confess, right? But that will be because of the absolute undeniability of the sovereignty of King Jesus, and there will be no one who can resist it at that point. But right now, in this in-between time, when the kingdom is now and not yet, you resist Jesus. He's not going to force himself upon you. They ask him to leave, and he does. So Jesus, those are all side points to my main point. Here we go. They began, verse 17, to beg Jesus to depart from their region, and as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. Oh, this seems like a perfect thing, right? Jesus has been calling disciples in all the Gospels. He sees Philip and Andrew. He sees Peter. He sees John. He calls them to leave their nets and to leave their businesses and to leave their lives and to follow him. It feels like part of Jesus' methodology is to call followers to follow him. We even talked last night about the fact that there's a difference between being a follower of Jesus and an admirer of Jesus. Now here we've got a guy who was formerly demon-possessed, cutting himself, screaming, buck naked, whatever. And he's there. Jesus is getting back in the boat, and the guy's like, hey, here we go. Where are we going to go? I'm with you. I'm a follower. I'm a Jesus follower. Let's go. I can't wait to take the boat ride. And strangely, Jesus puts out his hand and says, you can't come with. Does that feel out of character a little bit? It's kind of weird because Jesus was in the business of calling followers. And here's a guy who's eager to follow. He's just had his life transformed. He's got a great story to tell. And Jesus says, you can't come. Look at the way this goes down. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. Verse 19, Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone marveled. There's something really beautiful that happens here, right? What happens is you've got this guy who's eager to get in the boat and go somewhere else. You know why he's eager to get in the boat and go somewhere else? Because all the people on this side of the Sea of Galilee have seen him with his pants off, right? Literally. Everybody on this side of the Sea of Galilee have seen him at his absolute worst. Stark, raving mad, naked, bloody, disgusting, weird. All the people in the town for a long time have seen him as a source of trouble. They've tried to manage him. They've tied him up. They've chained him. They've done all these things. Wouldn't you want to get in a boat and go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee also? Wouldn't you want to get away from all these people who've absolutely seen you at your worst? I couldn't wait until the seniors who saw me with my pants ripped graduated and they weren't on the drumline anymore, right? There's something lovely about getting away from people who've seen you at your worst. But what Jesus says to him is, your witness and your story actually plays better to the people who've seen you in the darkness and in the light. If Jesus takes the formerly demon-possessed man to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, all he has the ability to do on the other side of the Sea of Galilee is say, hey, you guys don't know me, and we've never met before, but I got to tell you, I live over by the Decapolis, and I used to be crazy. And in fact, I didn't wear clothes, and I'd scream and cut myself and do all kinds of wild stuff. You can't believe it, right? Jesus came, he cast the demons out of me, and I'm a new man, I follow Jesus. Praise God, right? He could do that message on that side, on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. But that message doesn't have the same power on the other side of the Sea of Galilee as it does on this side of the Sea of Galilee, in his home. The word that Jesus uses there for your home is the Greek word oikos, which doesn't necessarily just mean your family. It means the people in your circle. Each one of us have, at any given time, like 10 to 15 people who are kind of on the front row of our life. People who know you better than anybody else, people that you see regularly. It could be coworkers. It could be people that this is sort of a unique anomaly. You've got like 30 people that are in your life, 40 people that are in your life all the time. But for the rest of your life, you're always going to have an oikos. You're always going to have a group of people, a circle, right? And what he says is your story plays best to your circle. The people who've seen you stark raving mad, buck naked, bloody and screaming, right? Those people have the ability to see the difference between who you were and who you are in a way that no one else can. So the essence of the story here, and the thing I want you to get, is like the stuff that sometimes makes you feel like you're disqualified from being used by God. Maybe you're not a great public speaker. Maybe you're not great at memorization. Maybe you get nervous when it comes to sharing your faith. Maybe you have a hard time wrestling with theological issues. You don't like apologetics. I don't know. There are all kinds of ways in which Christians can sometimes sort of disqualify themselves, or there might be bigger things. You might have stuff in your past you hope nobody ever finds out about. You might have stuff that's happened in your life that you wish had never occurred. There might be things that you carry some residual shame about or whatever. And we can have a whole other conversation about the ways in which God uses our conscience to provoke transformation, but we're not meant to live in guilt and shame. That's not a place we're supposed to soak. It's meant to be a catalyst that provokes transformation and movement. But what I want to say to you is that God made you just right. You're just right. You're exactly the man or the woman that you need to be to have an impact on your oikos. There is a group of people around you at any given time, and there will be a group of people around you for the rest of your life that you are better suited to have an impact on than Billy Graham would be if he were alive. Like the ghost of Billy Graham would be scary for anybody, right? That's not what I'm talking about. There is a group of people in your life that no one is better suited to have an impact on than you are, because God made you uniquely, and then he put you in your circle. He put you in your oikos, right? The people that gravitate to you naturally. I don't know what your lives are like. I don't know what your friend groups are like. I don't know what it's like where you came from before you were at Joshua. But in the regular world, right, you had a group of people that were like your people. They're the people that you hang with on Friday nights, or they're the people that you make pizzas with at the Pizza Hut or whatever. And for a different variety of reasons, you have magnetized together. Those people have magnetized to you because there's something about you that draws them, or there's something about a shared vocation that has drawn you together. There's something about the city that you live in, or a shared experience. Sometimes they live in the same house with you because they're your cousins or your brothers or sisters or whatever. God has put people in your circle, and they know you better than anybody else. And sometimes that feels like a disqualifier. Like you think, gosh, I don't want to talk to the people in my circle about Jesus because they've seen me at my worst. No, that's exactly who you want to talk to. The people who recognize that at this point in your life, you are chosen and holy and royal, all those things we saw in Peter, but that you are all those things so that you may proclaim the excellencies who drew you out of the darkness into the light. It's the totality of the story, right? I think sometimes we'd rather go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee and talk to people who've never met us, people who don't know our story. But God made you and has redeemed you, and has allowed you to go through the circumstances you've gone to so that you can have a specific impact on a specific group that no one can have the impact on better than anybody else. You know that the statistics tell us that 90% of conversions, somewhere in the range of 90%, it's a little bit plus, people who give their life to Christ do so in the context of a close relationship and not an evangelistic meeting. I might have said this to you already. This is important, right? It doesn't mean that people don't come to Jesus at Hume Lake, right? Every summer, somebody gets up and preaches in Ponderosa Chapel. There's 1,000 people in there, and they do an altar call, and people stand up and whatever. There are kids who get saved in that context. I'm not denying that. But the greatest number of lasting commitments to Christ over time happen when it's like me talking to the guy I work with at Pizza Hut, or me talking to my kids, or me talking to my parents, or me talking to my neighbors, or me talking to my coworkers. Why? Because they have context for who I am, who I was, who I will be, right? They see my life in its totality. And that might make you uncomfortable, but what God has planned for you is better than what you plan for yourself. I'll finish with just one little story. When my wife and I first got married, I remember we were sitting in this little apartment. For the first 5 years or 4 years we were married, we didn't actually have a house because we were on tour all the time. So when we come back to Phoenix to be in the recording studio or whatever, we would just rent a little apartment for a couple of months. And so we're sitting in this apartment shortly after we were married, like first year of marriage. And we're sitting in the apartment watching TV, and all of a sudden she goes, hey, do you want some ice cream? And I was like, look at me. I always want ice cream. What are you talking about, right? So she goes, I'm going to go get us some ice cream. I'm like, sweet. So she jumps up, she goes into the little kitchenette thing in this apartment, and I could hear her in there, and she's getting ice cream for us. And I just remember sitting on the couch thinking like, this is so cool. Like, I married my best friend. She's amazing. She's smart. She's beautiful. All these things. We have this place. We get to travel the country together. And now, like, just randomly, we're watching TV together, and just out of nowhere, like, she jumps up and she's making ice cream for us. Like, I'm living the dream. Like, this is the best life ever, right? So I'm just feeling happy and whatever. And she comes back out of the kitchen. She got 2 bowls, and she hands me the bowl with the spoon, and I look into the bowl, and it's like I have to kind of look over the edge of the bowl and down into the bottom, and in the bottom of the bowl, there is this tiny, I don't even know how you make an ice cream scoop this small, right? Like with a melon baller, maybe? I have no idea how she did it. It's like a teeny little nugget of ice cream. And I laughed. I was like, this is hilarious. Like, this is really funny. This is cute. This is the cutest little ice cream scoop, And I'm like, honestly, though, can I get like a regular amount? And she goes, that is the recommended serving. And I was like, what? And she goes, on the side of the ice cream, there's like a recommended serving size. This is the recommended serving size of ice cream. And I was like, who in the history of the world ever read the recommended serving size for ice cream? Like, why? Who even pays attention to that? And she goes, I do. She goes, Darin, I love you. We just got married. Like, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. She's like, I'm never going to give you something that's bad for you. And so I said, well, then I'll get my own ice cream, right? Right? And it was like there was a little bit of tension there, but I got up and I went and I scooped some more ice cream for myself. And to this day, now 26 years later, she does not scoop ice cream for me, right? What just happened there? I want you to think about the principle. The principle is, I didn't want her to do for me what she wanted to do, because what she wanted for me was better for me than what I wanted for myself. Does that make sense? So I'll do it myself because I want what's bad for me. Right? Isn't that what just happened there? Can I tell you, Joshua, like, this will be a struggle with you in your followership of Jesus forever. You will always feel the tension of not wanting to be obedient to the purposes of Christ because he created you and he wants what's best for you, but you want what you want, right? You want what you want. You want to get in the boat and go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee some of the time. You don't want to sacrifice. You don't want to serve. You don't want to point away from yourself. You want to point to yourself, right? You don't want to reveal Christ. You want to reveal you in all your glory. Like, there are going to be these moments where you feel this tension. And what I'm telling you is I want you to be almost painfully aware of those moments when you're saying to God, I know what you want for me, but I don't want what you want for me because I don't want what's best for me. That's what that is every time. Every time you're resistant to God's purpose and design for you, what you're essentially saying is, I'll get my own ice cream because I want what's bad for me. See it? God has made you uniquely. And he's made you different than the people sitting next to you and the people in the row behind you or in front of you. He's made you special And I'm not just doing that like you're good enough and smart. This isn't like self-affirmation. I'm telling you that part of God's design is to make ears and elbows and noses and eyes and to put us in different circumstances so that when we're together, we make something beautiful. And there is no piece that's insignificant. There is no piece that's unnecessary. You have the ability to impact a circle of people, an oikos of people that I could not impact in the same way. So lean into that. Lean into who God made you to be. What are your hobbies? What are your preferences? What are your tastes? What are the things that are unique about who God made you? What are the things that are unique about your life and your history and your experience? God has allowed you to be on the path you're on to make you the person you are today, to have an impact on the people He's put around you today. And in 5 years, He'll put a different group of people around you. Some will be the same, some will be different. You'll also have walked a road in 5 years that will have shaped you into a uniquely different woman or a uniquely different man, but you'll still be exactly who He wants you to be to impact the people He puts in your circle. So just pay attention to who they are and live a life that God created you for, that's good for you and hard, rather than the thing you want, which is bad for you. Would you pray with me? God, thanks for these students. Thank you for your design. Thank you that I don't have to spend any amount of time trying to be somebody else, trying to match my skills and abilities and wits with other people who maybe are more skilled than me or more witty than me or faster runners or better at playing cymbals or whatever. I don't have to think that through. Instead, I recognize that, God, you've got me on a path, and that path both includes my growth as you are revealed to me and in me and by me. It includes my growth, but it also recognizes that you're going to put people around me that sometimes have seen me at my best and sometimes have seen me at my worst, and they're exactly the people that you want me to reveal Christ to. I'm going to be faithful to be an ambassador in the context in which you place me and not to worry about being somewhere else or being someone else, but to just revel in the opportunity to be a part of your diverse body and bring you glory as the guy you made me to be. And I pray that in Jesus' name. And I pray that for each of my friends in this place. Amen. Thanks, you guys. God bless you.